Long ago, in the village of Jatijajar, Indonesia, a series of paranormal incidents happened involving 3 children. What exactly happened with them remained unknown to this day. Even though the people of the village eventually forgot about it, the terrifying event resurfaces after 30 years. It's the story of the 2023 Indonesian horror movie, Walk to Maghrib. Let's begin. It was late afternoon when 3 friends, Wadi, Karda, and Drajat, were playing near the jungle. As the evening approached, Wadi suggested they should head back home. However, Karda teased Wadi, saying she is scared of ghosts and insisted that they would return later. He even joked that she should go home alone if she is too afraid. As Wadi begins walking home, Drajat mischievously hits a small piece of wood with a stick, accidentally sending it deeper into the jungle. Karda, determined to retrieve the wood, decides to go into the jungle alone to find it. Eventually, he located the piece of wood next to a stone, but as he reached out to pick it up, he felt something strange in the air. Suddenly, the piece of wood falls into a small hole nearby. Without thinking much, Karda instinctively reached his hands into the hole to fetch the piece of wood. On the other side, when Wadi was walking alone, she heard a mysterious sound, as if someone was calling her to play. Focused on the sound, she moved towards it, and suddenly an unseen force grabbed her from the back and drags her inside the jungle. Overwhelmed with fear, Wadi screamed, and at the same instant, a mysterious hand grabs Karda's hand from under the hole. On one side was Drajat, and on the other side his 2 friends were in terrible distress. However, with all his might, Karda pulls his hand up but finds one of his fingers missing. In utter distress, Karda lets out a scream, but that sound seemed to vanish deep into the heart of the dense jungle. From here, the scene switches forward to 30 years later, in the year 2002. 2 friends are running through the small path in the jungle. Just like every day, they are late for school. Adi and Saman are best friends, and they both study in a village school where there is only one teacher from the city who teaches all the children. Her name is Miss Oro. They both are late for school every day, which puts them among the lowest scoring students in the class, whereas the rest of the students perform well academically. While Miss Oro scolds them both, the entire class enjoys the event. Ayu, the class monitor, is the teacher's favorite because of her exceptional performance. Miss Oro admires Ayu's dedication to homework and her eagerness to learn new things, so she gifts her a pen. However, whenever an opportunity arises, Ayu never leaves the opportunity to make fun of his 2 friends. Their friendship remains unbreakable, no matter how different their academic achievements may be. Saman comes from the poorest family among his friends, and he earns money by collecting honey from the jungle to sell at Ayu's father's shop. However, recently, he has been facing difficulties as he wakes up late, and it has caused him to miss collecting honey for the past few days. Ayu's father, Mr. Marto, warns Saman about his habit of procrastination in collecting honey. He explains that if Samyun, Saman's brother, returns from the city, he would demand money for the honey that Saman is supposed to sell. If Saman fails to provide the honey in time, he won't be able to sell them and won't have the money to give to his brother. Saman's family is passing through tough times. At home, he only has his mute and bedridden grandmother, and he has to manage everything all by himself. Meanwhile, a pickup truck arrives in their village, announcing the upcoming Wong function in the neighboring village of Jedapini and inviting everyone to attend. As the 2 friends continued discussing the Wong function while walking through the jungle, they arrived at the spot with the big stone right in front of them. Adi mentioned hearing a story about Mr. Karda losing his finger around this area. However, Saman found it funny and started joking about it. At that instant, unknown to them, a black shadow can be seen lurking behind them, staring at them intently. Meanwhile, just before dusk, Ayu comes to give food to someone in an old hut at the far end of the village. But the man scolds Ayu and tells her to hurry back home as evening is approaching and it is not safe to stay here. Meanwhile, when Saman sits down to feed his grandmother at night, his brother Samyun returns home. After returning from work, he gets very angry when he sees the unsold pitchers of honey still placed on the table. Even though they are struggling financially, Saman neglects his duties, which infuriates Samyun and leads to him beating Saman in anger. The unfortunate grandmother watches helplessly as her beloved grandson is mistreated right before her eyes. She loves him deeply, but she can't protect him from the abuse. Samyun gives him an order to sell all the honey by the next day and leaves. At that moment, a dark figure, like a spirit from the jungle, is seen standing behind Saman. However, before he could see, the spirit swiftly disappears into the darkness. The following morning, the two of them are running late as usual, with pitchers of honey in Saman's hands. They must sell the honey to Mr. Marta today no matter what. The pressure to sell the honey causes them to arrive late at school once again, resulting in Mrs. Aura punishing them by assigning restroom cleaning duties. They have no choice but to comply, even though they don't want to do it. To add to their troubles, if they are late in completing the restroom cleaning, they will miss the only available bus to Jatapini and as a result will miss the Wang function. During that time, a mentally disturbed person was spotted running in fear through the jungle. Gasping for breath, he finally reached the edge of the jungle near a ditch. As he looked up, he was startled to see the entire sky turning red. For some unknown reason, this sight filled him with fear. Meanwhile, the two friends managed to catch the last vehicle heading towards Jatapini. On their way to the car, Saman expressed frustration about Mrs. Aura. She seems to be always angry with them, but why? Adi explains that Madam had never experienced love and remained single, which might be the reason for her constant irritable mood. One of the friends blurts out negative thoughts about Madam, wishing she would leave the school or even die. This statement angers the driver, who scolds Saman for being disrespectful. However, the driver's attention is diverted when he sees someone standing on the road in front of them. He narrowly manages to steer the car away, preventing an accident. When they get out of the car to inspect the situation, they discover that the car's tire has gone flat. On the other side, alone at home, Madame Aura was doing her own work. Suddenly, she noticed something strange at the main door. Why is the door open when she had locked it herself from the inside? Maybe she absent-mindedly forgot to lock it earlier. Without thinking much, she closed the door again and came inside. But as soon as she stepped inside, someone knocked on the door. Now, who could it be? She went to check, and to her surprise, the door was open again. This was just impossible. Even though she locked it again with the key, the door opened on its own once more. She couldn't understand what was happening. Bewildered, she decided to close the door firmly and lock it properly this time. However, when she stepped inside, the door opened again. This was beyond belief. Something supernatural must be happening. And then, right behind her, she saw a terrifying figure dressed in black cloth, standing there with a dark presence. Her entire body trembled, her hands with long nails, and the black-clothed spirit menacingly stared at her. In an instant, the spirit showed no mercy and brutally killed her. While fixing their car on the jungle road, Adi and Saman encountered two men rushing toward the village. Curious, they inquired about the commotion, and to their shock, they were informed that Madame Aura had tragically passed away in an accident. This news left Saman terrified, and they hurriedly went to Madame's house, where they found the entire village gathered. People were disturbed by what they had witnessed and covered Madame's body entirely to shield it from view. The villagers advised Adi and Saman to leave, But Saman couldn't shake off the feeling that they were somehow responsible for Madame Aura's death. The mentally disturbed man of the village was spotted standing ominously in the dark beside the house, adding to the eerie atmosphere. The following day, during the funeral, everyone in the village gathered for the ceremony. Saman was still burdened with guilt and remorse. As he looked at Madame Aura's face, he was shocked to see her in a horrifying state. Her appearance was so ghastly that it terrified him. As they were taking her body to the car, the sight of Madame Aura's almost molten form filled Saman with fear, and instantly he opens his eyes with a loud scream. In fact, he was experiencing nightmares all this time due to the traumatic events. The next moment, he hears a knock on the door. It was Adi who had come to console his friend. He mentions that a new madam is coming to their school, and hopefully, she wouldn't be like Madame Aura. However, the question lingering in their minds was why all this happened after they had wished her death. In the evening, while Saman was preparing food for his grandmother, he noticed her looking out the window, trying to communicate something, fear evident in her eyes. Before he could comprehend, the door unexpectedly swung open by itself. Frightened, he couldn't muster the courage to look back but heard a chilling sound and saw the terrible form of Madame Aura moving towards him as if to choke him. Yet, the next moment, she vanished, leaving Saman perplexed. He quickly went inside, washing his face with water from an urn. As he moved back slightly, to his astonishment, a black-clothed spirit emerged from the urn and seemed to possess him. That night, Ayu and her father, along with some village dignitaries, gather at the village road junction to welcome the new teacher, Madame Ningxi, who is coming to teach the students in the village. Madame Ningxi arrives at the village in the last car of the night. In fact, the driver made a mistake and entered the neighboring village, which is why she arrives late. Firstly, the head of the village, Rahim, introduces himself to Madame Ningxi and then introduces everyone else to her. But in spite of all this, the mentally disturbed man is watching them all from a distance. But why? In the morning, after finishing work in the city, Samian returns to the village and first of all goes to collect money from Ayu's father. But to his surprise, he says that Saman had not brought any honey for the past couple of days. Samian gets angry on hearing this and makes up his mind to beat his brother going back home. And that is what happens. Samian returns home and beats his brother badly, shouting in anger and saying, "What do you want?" The answer was terrifying. "Your death." Hearing this, Samian goes mad and proceeds to beat him again, but he is shocked to see the terrible spirit dressed in black behind Saman. Now Saman is smiling at him, and the next moment jumps on him and with a knife cuts him from the chest to the stomach and brutally kills him. The sick grandmother helplessly watches everything unfold in front of her eyes. Saman places his brother's lifeless body next to his grandmother's bed and leaves the house, holding a knife. Late at night, he goes to Rahim's chicken farm, seemingly possessed. Meanwhile, the mentally disturbed person observes the events from a distance and leaves the talisman hanging in someone's house. But why did he do that? The next morning, Ayu's father opens his shop shutter and sees Saman banging his head abnormally against the wall. Ayu and his father are surprised and concerned witnessing this bizarre scene. When they inquire about his condition, Saman hands them 2 pitchers that are supposed to contain honey. To test the freshness of the honey, Mr. Marto brings the pitchers close to his nose to smell them, but immediately throws them away from his hand in shock. To their horror, the pitchers contain blood instead of honey. Meanwhile, Rahim comes out in the morning with his tea and is shocked to see a chilling scene. All the chickens from his farm are hanging in front of his door. As the sun fully rises, classes start at school like any other day. Ayu is about to take out her homework book when the pen given by Madame Aura slips from her hand. As she bends down to pick it up, she sees Madame Aura approaching her from behind. Ayu is the only one who can see her. When Madame Aura startles her, Ayu screams in front of the whole class. However, she keeps this incident to herself and finishes the day at school. Upon returning home, Ayu finds her father has called Mr. Rahim to their house. They discover blood in the pitchers instead of honey and find the dead chickens' bodies hanging in Mr. Rahim's house. These two incidents raise suspicion towards Saman, leading everyone to head to his house without delay. Meanwhile, Ayu has a different plan in her mind. She puts Adi on her bicycle, and they head to Saman's house. Little do they know what awaits them there. On the other hand, Mr. Rahim enters Saman's house but quickly runs out, visibly frightened and vomiting, as he sees Samian's decomposing body lying next to his sick grandmother. The commotion spreads, and soon, the entire village gathers at Saman's house, trying to comprehend the eerie turn of events. On the other side, Adi suddenly runs towards the jungle alone, and Ayu follows him with Amin, the village security guard. They find Adi standing at the edge of the jungle near the canal, and there they see Saman standing in the water. Adi calls out to him, but he doesn't respond, as if he can't hear anything. Frustrated, they try to bring him back to the shore, but he suddenly faints. Amin and Ayu carry him back home, where he remains silent and unresponsive to everyone's questions. When Madame Ninshur expresses her desire to meet him alone, Rahim informs her that they have tried everything, but nothing seems to work. Saman appears to be humming something like a song, and they have already called the police for help. However, Madame Ninshur insists on talking to him once. She enters the room to communicate with him, but unfortunately it doesn't yield any results. Nonetheless, the mentally disturbed man continues to observe their every movement from a distance. After a few minutes, Madame Ninshur comes out of the room without being able to communicate with Saman. He is still humming the strange song. In the evening, just when Saman seems to snap out of his trance, he sees his deceased brother, Samian, standing in front of him. In that instant, Saman becomes possessed again as Madame Aura appears and grabs his throat from behind. After some time, the police arrived, and as they entered the room, everyone present was left speechless. Saman's lifeless body was found hanging inside the room. This incident brought a wave of fear and darkness to the entire village. People were afraid to be outside after dusk. Adi, in particular, was deeply shocked by the death of his friend. When Adi was sitting alone at the end of the class, Madame Ninshur noticed Adi's distress and tried to comfort him. Madame Ninshur consoles Adi, assuring him that she is there to support and listen to him. She encourages him to share any problems he may have, understanding that it's normal to feel upset about his friend's death. With exams approaching and knowing that Adi's academic results were not very good, Madame suggests he stay for extra classes in the evening, to which Adi agrees. Later, in the evening, Madame asks Adi to go home and pray, but Adi insists on staying behind to take care of things. After Madame leaves, Adi begins to pray alone. However, during his prayers, he hears a voice coming from behind him. Startled, he turns around and sees someone who resembles Saman sweeping the restroom. The flickering lights make it hard for Adi to see the figure clearly. Suddenly, the figure covered in blood starts moving towards him, and Adi becomes filled with fear. Something strange happens to him, and he becomes possessed. The next day, during the phaser prayer, Adi's father finds him intensely staring at the wall and repeatedly banging his head. Adi tells his father that he is feeling sleepy and won't pray phaser that day. Concerned, his father leaves without saying anything further, but he notices the mentally disturbed man watching them from outside through a hole in the wall. After driving him away, his father also notices the strange talisman hanging at the door. At school the next day, IU experiences a similar incident with Madame Aura scaring her again. Although she manages to handle it this time, she suddenly realizes that Adi is missing. IU decides to look for him and heads toward the jungle on her bicycle. However, the mentally disturbed man stops her in the middle of the road. Meanwhile, another boy named Banan is playing in the yard of his house. Adi, standing just behind a banana tree, signals him to come closer. Since Banan is Adi's classmate, he goes towards him without thinking much. After some time, Bandan's mother comes out of the house and realizes that her son is missing. As the late afternoon arrives and both Bandan and Adi still haven't returned, the two families gather the villagers and start searching for them in the jungle. Unfortunately, that night they are nowhere to be found, and everyone returns empty-handed. The next day, during class, everyone is instructed to go straight home after school because the situation in the village is not good. Despite this, IU's focus remains on Madame Nishur. After school, IU stops Madame Nishur and hands her a talisman. As she touches the talisman, Madame Nishur gets a terrible shock and appears unwell for a moment, but she soon recovers. She asks IU about it, and IU explains, "I brought it for your protection." Madame Nishur appreciates IU's concern and advises her to go home and not wander around anymore. In the afternoon, as the villagers lock their doors to protect their children, IU decides to go out on her bicycle to pray, despite her father's forbiddance. While cycling, she spots Adi sitting in the middle of the road, seemingly occupied with something. As she calls out to him, Adi starts chasing her with an axe in his hand. Meanwhile, Rahim discovers Bandan's dead body by the mosque, adding to the chaos in the village. Amidst the turmoil, a woman notices Adi chasing IU with murderous intent. She quickly takes IU inside her house and locks the door. However, Adi is determined to enter through the back door and kill IU. Just as he is about to reach her, Amin intervenes and knocks Adi unconscious. During this tense situation, a considerable amount of time passes without IU returning home. Worried, her father steps out to see a cloth-wrapped body lying on the table next to the shop. With a trembling hand holding a torch, IU's father uncovers the cloth to find Saman's decomposed body that Adi brought from the grave. Meanwhile, they call the village's imam to calm Adi down, but the mystery behind these events remains unclear. After resolving the immediate situation, the villagers gather for a discussion with Mr. Kazan, Adi's father, suspecting that the mentally disturbed man, Karda, might be responsible. Furthermore, the families of all the deceased or possessed children have seen Karda hanging the strange talisman in their houses. IU's father also agrees with this revelation. As a result, everyone becomes suspicious of Karda, and they unite with the intention of confronting and possibly taking action against him. Everyone rushes to Karda's house and starts scolding him without giving him a chance to explain. Karda desperately tries to make them understand that the entire village is filled with bad luck, but nobody believes his words. Rahim and Mr. Marto intervene just in time to prevent the villagers from taking extreme measures. Mr. Marto addresses the crowd and urges them to refrain from committing further violence. He reminds them that the village is already facing many unfortunate events, and taking matters into their own hands will only add to the negativity. Instead, he suggests tying Karda to his own house as a temporary solution. The following morning, Madame Nishur pays a visit to IU. IU is surprised to see her and wonders what she wants. Madame Nishur begins,
"I heard about what happened to you last night. I hope you're feeling better now, but I must warn you that your safety is not guaranteed. I came to know that everyone went to Karda's house last night, and I also heard that you sometimes visit there as well."
Upon hearing this, IU becomes alarmed. Realizing the potential danger, she discreetly takes out the talisman from her bag and conceals it in her hand. The incident goes back to a few days ago in the afternoon when Carter called Ayu to his house and handed her a talisman. He said,
"Touch this talisman to any part of your madam's body. If she behaves strangely, then there is a problem." When Madame Ningxue arrived in this village, I observed the red sky, the birds' fearful chirping, and the turbulent wind. These were ominous signs that I had witnessed 30 years ago on a fateful afternoon when I was just a child. That afternoon changed my entire life. Ayu, your madam is not a human being, she is a Jinn, known as the Black Mother. It survives by consuming children. None of you are safe. But for your safety, I'm giving you this talisman. Touch it to Madam's body at least once, while I attempt to drive her out of this village. But the reason for her coming to the village is still unknown to me.
Returning to the present, Ayu is now overwhelmed with fear after learning everything from Carter. The most significant revelation is that Madame Ningxue herself knows everything. How could she not? It's impossible to hide anything from a Jinn. Madame Ningxue then reveals to Ayu that everyone's time will come. Salman's time had come, Adi's has come, and hers will also come. She advises Ayu to wait a little longer, questioning how long her dear Madame Aura will be able to protect her. With these haunting words, Madame Ningxue leaves Ayu in distress. In the meantime, Carter, still tied up in Rahim's house, recalls the horrifying afternoon that took place 30 years ago. He is now sitting alone in the forest with his finger cut off, and Drajat's lifeless body lies nearby. The entire village witnessed a new level of terror on that dreadful day, and nobody knows where it will all lead. Returning to the present, Carter is being guarded by Amin. While Amin briefly leaves the room to go to the bathroom, Ayu seizes this opportunity to sneak into the room. Ayu informs Carter about the dire situation in the village, particularly about Adi being in great danger. She pleads with Carter to save him. Just then, the call to prayer is heard, triggering memories of the terrifying afternoon from 30 years ago. Carter has been haunted by the call to prayer ever since that day. However, Ayu encourages him to overcome this false doubt, assuring him that the prayer call will eventually guide them. With determination restored, Carter then sets Amin unconscious by striking him from behind. Ayu then rushes to save Adi, while Carter prepares to confront Ningxue, the Jinn. Upon reaching Madame's house, Carter discovers Ningxue sitting in front of the mirror, revealing her true Jinn form. Ningxue taunts Carter, reminding him of the past incident involving Drajat and his finger. As she speaks, she transforms into the appearance of Wadi, evoking memories of the night from 30 years ago. The Jinn displays Carter an event of that night where Wadi lies alone in the eerie jungle. She witnesses the Jinn in its true form, hovering in the air with Drajat's head in its hand. Carter becomes aware that the Jinn is attempting to manipulate his mind and emotions. He understands that he must take a different approach to stop the Jinn's evil influence. Determined to end this, Carter heads to the stone in the middle of the jungle, the place where everything started. Meanwhile, Adi is seen seemingly possessed walking toward the canal where they found possessed Salman some days ago. Ayu is following him to save him from any danger. As Carter attempted to set fire to the stones and the nearby tree root, it seemed as though an invisible force kept extinguishing the flames repeatedly. At that very moment, Adi reaches the Jinn, and the Jinn's harp-like claws slowly approach him, posing a serious threat to his safety. With determination, Carter continues his efforts to start the fire, despite Wadi's attempts to scare him. He understands that he must not let fear hinder him. So, Carter focuses on the name of Allah, ignites a fire, and throws it towards the stone and tree root. He clears his mind of all distractions and calls upon Allah with deep devotion. His powerful voice resonates through the entire forest. As a result, the Jinn's influence weakens, and it moves away from Adi. Just in time, Ayu and her father arrived to save Adi from the Jinn's grasp. After that night, all the children in the village, including Adi, survived, and the Jinn hasn't been seen since then. The reasons for its appearance and its connection to the jungle remain a mystery. The question lingers whether the village will be entirely free from its influence or not. Perhaps, if people lose faith in Allah and stray from their religious path, it might return again.